Hi everyone, my name is Jem and my Instagram handle is @knitsbyjem, and unsurprisingly my craft is knitting. Just some trigger warnings. Throughout this video I will be talking about alcoholism and anxiety. So before I start sharing, I will just say that this is a very nerve-wracking experience for me. I've shared quite a lot on this subject over the years, however never in this forum, and so I am very nervous, and I can only apologise for the number of times I say but I have written myself a little script, so fingers crossed that helps. I will also add that throughout my share I'll be referring to the person who suffers from alcoholism as they, in order to protect their anonymity. So my experience with alcoholism and mental health started about 8 years ago, so a long time before I actually started knitting, as I only started knitting in January of this year. And if you would have told me 8 years ago how the next few years of my life were going to go, I wouldn't have believed you at all. I just wouldn't have thought it was possible for things to turn out the way that they have, and I had no understanding of alcoholism or its impact at all. So I remember when I was told that this person was an alcoholic, I was at uni and I was about to sit my final year exams. I was in my room revising and I got a text from someone, and it had about 3 or 4 bottles of vodka in the picture that had been found, and I remember looking up from my phone and seeing a bottle of vodka that I had just posted on my Facebook, and I think the caption was something around the fact that my revision was in front of me and my reward was just behind it, and the irony of that is not lost on me now. So soon after I found out that this person in my life was an alcoholic, I went travelling for a month or so, and while I was away, the alcoholic in my life was having an operation on their foot, and so wouldn't be able to walk or drive for a while. And over this time, everything seemed better. The feedback that I was getting from other people in my life was that they were doing really well. They hadn't been drinking, and everything seemed a bit better. And so rather naively, I thought, oh, well, the worst is behind us. We'd only had a couple of months of it, but I thought the worst was behind us. And sadly, that was quite a naive thought process I had. And perhaps if I had understood alcoholism better at the time, then maybe I would have known that unfortunately, just because this person wasn't drinking, they weren't drinking because they physically couldn't, not because they had overcome their addiction. And almost as soon as they were able to walk again and access alcohol again, they did start drinking, and it was every day, more or less all day, every day. And their chosen alcohol was vodka, the really paint stripper kind as well. It's very, very unpleasant. And from that moment up until today, that has been the reality most of the time. Sometimes it's not every day. Sometimes they will go a week, sometimes they will go a month without drinking, but unfortunately they do always find their way back to it. And yeah, I guess a separate skill that I have learned over this time is that I can hear the sound of a vodka bottle being turned from miles away. And I've always said that would be my specialist skill if I ever go on mastermind, so maybe that will come up one day. But you do learn lots of different things. You learn lots of different things about the alcoholic when you care for someone that suffers from alcoholism. If it's that they use certain words when they've been drinking, or if they slur their words slightly differently, there are all these little tells that mean when you're particularly close with someone, you always know what's happening and when it's happening. And in the same way that this person has good days and bad days with their drinking, I would also have good days and bad days with how I would cope with it. At the beginning, when I would speak to people about it, I would get a lot of advice along the lines of, well, why don't they just stop drinking? And while I know that people's hearts were in the right places when they were saying this, or most of the time anyway they were, telling an alcoholic to just stop drinking is about as helpful as telling someone with depression to just smile a bit more. That's just not really how it works. And I've often described caring for someone who suffers from alcoholism as like watching a car crash in slow motion, and you just have to watch and you're completely helpless, and there's nothing you can do except hope that something changes before anything bad happens. When I was first coming to terms with having an alcoholic in my life, my emotions were all over the place. I was constantly on edge. I was always very angry. I tried every tactic in the book in order to get this person to stop drinking. I screamed, I shouted, I cried, I tried tough love, I tried being understanding, I tried smashing bottles, you name it, I tried it, and none of which I'm proud of. But in moments of sheer desperation, you will try anything you can to try and make things better. I was in quite a bad way at this time, and I was lashing out at anyone and everybody, and I was starting to think very irrationally. I would react very overly emotionally at very little things. And I remember one day I completely lost it, and I sent someone a very rambly, very incoherent text, and they encouraged me to go to Al-Anon. So Al-Anon is very similar to AA, but it is for family and friends of alcoholics, but it does follow the same principles. And I'd always turned down this suggestion because I just thought it was really depressing. I thought, I'm just going to walk into a room full of people who are really sad and I couldn't think of anything worse. But again, in desperation, I was willing to give it a go. And I remember my first meeting like it was yesterday. There were about 12 of us sat in a circle, and I was the youngest by a long, long way. And the format of the meeting was to introduce yourself, share how your week's been, and if you feel comfortable, share about the alcoholic in your life. And ordinarily there would be a particular topic that they would share on, but in this meeting, because they knew that I was a newcomer, someone offered to share their own individual experience with alcoholism. And I remember as they were talking about someone different in their life in comparison to the person in my life. And so in some ways their story was completely different. But every time they talked about how they felt and how it impacted them, it was as though they were speaking on my behalf. And when it came round to me, I remember sharing my experience, and everyone was nodding in all of the places where I would have expected them to nod. It was immediately clear that they really understood exactly how I felt. But what was quite foreign to me throughout that meeting and throughout the subsequent ones that I attended is that they were talking a lot about detachment and learning to let go, which I just didn't understand at all. I had spent so long trying to fix this person's life, trying to make life so easy that why would they want to drink, because everything for them was fantastic. And gradually, as I attended more and more meetings, I learned that the only person's actions that I have control over are my own, and that I can't allow my mood and my day to be dictated by how somebody else's day is going, regardless of whether they are drinking or not. And what I have learned through my own journey with mental health is that it isn't something that I can just pick up and put down. I have to work at it every single day. At the beginning, I was attending Al-Anon once every few months. And particularly over the last year, it has been difficult because I haven't been able to attend face-to-face meetings. And over the years, I've been able to build up more tools to be able to cope with things on a day-to-day basis. But it is something that does need constant work, and it is absolutely worth the time investing in yourself. And in April this year, things really came to a head with the alcoholic in my life. Because of COVID, I hadn't seen them, and so I didn't realise the situation was as bad as it was. And as a result, this person was admitted to hospital for about 10 days, I think it was. And I think the reality of it is that had they not gone in when they did, they actually may not have survived this particular instance. And over this time, while they were in hospital, my anxiety was understandably through the roof. I had sort of reverted back to all of the struggles that I had previously, in terms of constantly waiting by my phone, constantly needing updates, and just feeling completely out of control, and allowing my whole day to be dictated by how somebody else's day was going. And during that time, I found that the only thing that was really helping me, like I said, I couldn't attend the meetings that I would normally attend to speak to people. The only thing that was really helping me was knitting. And so jumping forward now to the start of this year, I mentioned earlier that I only started knitting in January. And so when it came to my mental health and dealing with someone who suffers from alcoholism, like I said, I had already developed some of the tools that I needed in order to cope with the situation that I'm living with. And when I started knitting, I was only supposed to just knit one baby jumper for my friend and then leave it there. But now, as I sit here with a wall of yarn in front of me and a few projects under my belt, I think I underestimated exactly how much I would get from starting knitting. It has been an incredible escape for me. I think particularly as a beginner, I'm certainly not skilled enough yet to just be able to knit without a pattern. And so having something that takes my whole focus has been really, really good for me, particularly over the last few months with various lockdowns and distractions being few and far between. It has been exactly what I needed, because it just takes all of my focus, and it's something that you're being productive with your time. I could have just sat there and been sad. I could have just sat there and cried constantly is how I felt, but I decided to be productive. I made the proactive choice to do something better with my time, and for that I am incredibly grateful for having found my craft. And so I just wanted to finish really by giving a bit of advice to anyone who might have an alcoholic in their life, anyone who might suffer from alcoholism themselves. I'm certainly no expert, but also anyone who knows someone who might have an alcoholic in their life. And I think firstly, to someone who might know someone who is who has an alcoholic in their life, I mentioned earlier that some of the earlier advice I was getting wasn't necessarily helpful, and it often contributed to how alone I felt, because I didn't feel like people understood what I was going through. And so that I just wanted to say that more often than not, all someone needs is just somebody to listen. So please try to understand the difference between someone who is looking for advice and someone who's looking for a friend to talk to. And then lastly, if you have an alcoholic in your life, or if you suffer from alcoholism yourself, I just want to say that you are not alone. It really often feels like you are. But it has amazed me over the years that I have been dealing with this illness in my life, how often I have spoken about it and someone has said, oh, I know somebody who has that, or my brother or my sister or my cousin or my mum or my dad. They will know someone who suffers from this, and it is much more common than people think. And just sharing how you feel helps to no end. It really has, in my experience, and my Instagram is certainly always open to anyone who needs it. So thank you for listening.